Good to have you with us. Joining me in the studio today are Preet Gill, the Labour MP for Birmingham Edgbaston, Patrick Harley, the Conservative leader of Dudley Council, and George Finch, Reform UK's leader of Warwickshire County Council. Thanks to all of you for joining me. And don't forget that if you have a view on any of today's subjects or a story that you think we should be covering, we would like to hear from you. You can get in contact by scanning the QR code on your screen now, or you can email us at polmids@bbc.co.uk. OK, that was Birmingham MP Ayub Khan talking to me on Thursday, and I should say in reaction to Craig Guilford's decision to retire on Friday. Mr Khan said at that point that it marked a dark and shameful chapter for Birmingham and the wider West Midlands. What do you think of Craig Guilford's decision to retire, Preet?
I think it's the right decision. I think, he would have seen that the Home Secretary's statement on Wednesday, very clear that the report presented to her by Her Majesty's Inspector was very damning. She said that she had lost confidence, and there would have been no doubt that he would have heard that statement. He would have heard the questions from all sides of the House, raising concerns. Fundamentally, public confidence matters in the police. And it's really important that the buck stops at the leadership at the top, and that's with the Chief Constable. And no doubt he would have heard the failings, he would have heard and read the report, which highlighted that any evidence, that any decision that's made has got to be rooted in evidence, because it's so important for cohesion in our city, which is so diverse, our region. And it's got to give people confidence that when the police are taking these decisions, they're factual, they're correct, and they've been checked.
We heard from Simon Foster, the Labour Police and Crime Commissioner for the West Midlands, at the top of the programme. He, in fact, paid tribute to the work done by Craig Guilford for the last 3 years as Chief Constable. But should Simon Foster have acted more quickly?
Well, look, Simon Foster heard the statement, and he would have had sight of the report following that statement, and he would then have had to follow due process, which he set out. Now, there was some delay in what he had actually set out, and I'm sure many people would have expected to have taken a decision, but he had the right. I mean, the powers that he has got is to follow a statutory due process, because the Home Secretary did not have the powers, because they were removed by the previous Conservative government, in order to be able to
So it's the Police and Crime Commissioners that have the power to sort of hire and fire Chief Constables. Simon Foster didn't do that. There was a statement from Craig Guilford following his decision on Friday. At the centre of that, he doesn't really apologise, but he does say that he'd come to the conclusion that the political and media frenzy around himself and his position had become detrimental to the great work undertaken by his officers and to the staff serving the communities in the West Midlands. He goes on to pay tribute to those staff. Patrick, he's taken this decision to retire. Is that the right decision?
It's the right decision that he has gone. I think it's the wrong decision that he hasn't apologised. We have a Labour Home Secretary who has said quite publicly she's lost confidence in this Chief Constable. The Police and Crime Commissioner should have followed that lead and dismissed him there and then. There is no excuse. This is appalling behaviour.
Although Simon Foster would say, look, he was following process. We're still awaiting. We haven't had the report from the parliamentarians yet. We haven't had the Home Affairs Select Committee report. There's still a process to follow.
I think there is enough evidence for the PCC to have made up his mind at the same time as the Prime Minister, at the same time as the Home Secretary. When you have two leading figures in the country coming to that conclusion, it shouldn't take several more days for the PCC to come to the same conclusion.
OK. George Finch, we've heard, a big part of this row is about the argument about whether the West Midlands Police came under political pressure to make this decision. There will be people who see Craig Guilford being forced out in their eyes as the same thing, as political pressure upon the police.
I think what we're seeing here, when we saw that independent MP in Birmingham, was absolutely shocking what he was saying. The people see it black and white. What happened there at that football game was terrible. You cannot just ban people like that. And the question therefore goes from the people to the people that are in charge of the police. If you do not trust these public services, then they will fail. And this is exactly another prime example and people are not going to trust the police. And staggering what that independent MP, quite frankly, he's crackers. Yeah.
I mean, Preet, the Home Secretary has also paid tribute in her statement to the work done by Craig Guilford. And, you know, to that point, there will be people saying, you know, there's a huge amount of public attention and political criticism has been heaped on the West Midlands Force for a decision which was incredibly difficult, and that in itself is problematic.
Look, I also pay tribute to the work that the Chief Constable and the wider West Midlands Police Force does every single day. It is really tough, but people do expect that when decisions of this nature, which are about risk assessments, have got to be done based on evidence and based on fact, and they've got to be transparent. Now, what's come out is lots of information at different stages, and of course, the Home Affairs Select Committee did its own investigation, and there's been a subsequent letter by the Chief Constable clearly stating that what he had then presented at the Home Affairs Select Committee about AI being used as one factor of evidence being presented wasn't actually true, and he apologised for that. So I think, look, the public do expect that decisions are based on evidence. This is about cohesion. This is about making sure all communities have a say when things like this are going to be taking place. Fundamentally, though, we as a country, we as a city and region are very welcoming. And whilst it's a policing matter in terms of events like this, there is going to be a final report that's going to be presented, which will look at the whole process around SAGs. But certainly the Home Secretary is clear that she wants the powers to be able to take decisions herself.
Indeed. All right, we're going to leave that there, but we'll bring all of those further reports into this to you when we get them. Now, a BBC investigating the collapse of the charity that ran Coventry's City of Culture Year. The trust went into administration in 2023, months after it had borrowed £1 million worth of public funds from Coventry City Council. The former chief executive of the trust has apologised for the errors, but businesses that lost money are now calling for an inquiry. Joshua Nevitt reports.
For Coventry, 2021 was a year of celebration.
It's what Coventry's needed for years.
It's wonderful to see everybody coming together.
I'm loving every moment.
That excitement soon turned to disappointment, though, when the charity delivering the City of Culture's legacy projects faced financial pressures.
What we have is short-term cash flow in that we are expecting for the grants to come in, other income to come in, and we've had some, less successful sales over the summer.
But the trust ended up collapsing, and the BBC has obtained emails and minutes of meetings that reveal, for the first time, internal failures were a significant factor in the trust's demise. In a 2022 email, Chief Executive Martin Sutherland said staff had discovered considerable disparities in the accounts, worsening the trust's finances by almost £1 million. Although fraud was discussed, at meetings the trust board members were repeatedly told it was incompetence, not criminal intent. For more than a year, Coventry City Council refused to release these documents. But we now know about these failings after the Information Commissioner compelled the council to disclose the details. Mr. Sutherland declined an interview, but told us trustees were reassured there had been no frauds. He highlighted how external auditors had raised no concerns. He apologised for the mistakes, but said wider financial pressures led to the trust entering administration, including missed sales targets and uncertainties related to the COVID pandemic. Later in 2022, Coventry City Council provided a £1 million loan to the trust, despite early doubts it could be repaid.
The trust went into administration in 2023, and one consequence was the closure of this art gallery in Coventry City Centre. The real store was supposed to be a big earner for the trust and a key part of its legacy. But documents I have show the Trust's audit committee had serious doubts about the gallery's business plan. And ultimately those fears were realised, and the Trust Legacy programme was scrapped entirely.
The council told the BBC it had been transparent about the risks of granting the loan, which was never paid back.
I think the scale of what's been uncovered and revealed in this FOI investigation is truly shocking. It tells a tale of incompetence, it tells a tale of chaos, and it tells a tale of cover-up as well. And I think now more than ever, to restore confidence in this whole programme, we need an investigation, and we need it now.
The Charity Commission is reviewing what happened to the trust, but it's yet to launch a full inquiry with legal powers. That's frustrated businesses that are owed money, including Assembly, which puts on a festival at this site in the city.
We were left holding a loss of 1.4 million. I mean, it virtually shut our company down. It was only by borrowing a huge amount of money from the bank that we've been able to get through over recent years.
There were successes. Almost half of the city's residents took part in some way, and it helped bring millions into the local economy.
I think it was a great honour to become City of Culture. It felt like a really important moment for the city.
Highly Sprung, which put on this performance, benefited from some of that investment. But its co-founder says the Trust's failings had a serious impact on the city's reputation.
I think human error happens. I think to this scale, it feels very difficult to kind of comprehend. And I think the legacy means that we're kind of tarnished.
Coventry also has a reputation for recovering strongly from setbacks. But can it do so this time if there's no chance to learn from the mistakes of the past?
That's Josh Nevitt with that report. George, this is your neighbouring authority, Coventry and Warwickshire. Do you think there needs to be an inquiry into this?
I think it's very disappointing that a great event like the Coventry City of Culture has found itself in some terrible financial situations now. There's so many questions that need to be answered. So I do believe that there should be an inquiry to this. And it just goes to show, there's so many questions about the transparency of the Labour-controlled council and what was going on with them and the charity. But I do believe that transparency and accountability are so important, and especially when this meant so much to the people of Coventry. So we just have to get to find what actually happened.
Preet, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, the charity is independent. The National Audit Office has already done an investigation. It said that there's no wrongdoing by Coventry City Council. Let's not forget that this event had half the population of Coventry involved. It raised 150 million from a footfall of tourism. This is really important that we are enabling people to celebrate their culture and heritage. But what I would say, the Charity Commission has got a responsibility to make sure it investigates and finds out what is happening, because there are lots of people relying on an income that they have lost.
Yeah, not wrongdoing, but was it a wise decision by the local authority to hand over that money when things already appeared to be in quite a confusing state?
Well, look, it was independent. I mean, you would expect that the council would have had a process by which transparency was a key part of that. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of that.
Josh's investigation, he had to fight tooth and nail with this Freedom of Information request, taking it all the way to the Information Commissioner to be able to get this information. So transparency, arguably, it was an issue.
Yeah, look, I mean, there was an accounting error, and it's quite a significant one. This is taxpayers' money at the end of the day, and they will want to see that there is a proper process. But it is the Charity Commission that have the powers and will be the ones that need to carry out that investigation to make sure and find out how did this actually happen.
Patrick, as a council leader, this is, was a very difficult situation for Coventry Council, wasn't it? You've got this huge event which lots of people are dependent on. They didn't want to see it sink. They put the money in, but this is the result.
But if there were doubts at the very start about loaning this company almost £1 million, then the alarm bells should have been ringing and due process should have been followed. There should have been a complete audit trail. Clearly that isn't. Otherwise, that £1 million would not have been loaned. And it's not good enough to pass it on to the Charity Commission. This is the responsibility of Coventry City Council officials. Had my officials done that, then I'd be looking for a new golden triangle, which is a chief exec, monitoring officer and a 151 officer. They would all be heading somewhere else other than Dudley, because that's just not good enough.
OK, all right. Well, we will await the results of that Charity Commission review, but thanks all. We're going to move on now. Is it ever right to cancel elections? Councils across the West Midlands have asked ministers to call off their local elections, which are due in May. Under Labour's plans to shake up local government, district councils across the region are facing abolition in 2028. So far, Cheltenham, Cannock, Nuneaton and Bedworth, Redditch, Rugby and Tamworth councils have all written to the government asking to have their elections cancelled. However, the move is not without controversy. On Tuesday night, protesters turned up in Redditch to rail against the Labour-run authority's decision.
Well, I think it's a real shame that they have put democracy as second class to things like the cost of democracy. We all know that democracy costs money, is not free, but it is worthwhile. And the problem is, if you keep cancelling election one after the other, then what you're doing is setting a precedent that you can cancel any election for any reason.
Well, Redditch Borough Council says the move will save taxpayers £192,000 and give it more time to prepare for that shake-up of councils.
This is all about capacity for local government reorganisation. The Minister has written to me asking us to consider the capacity of Redditch Borough Council to deliver local government reorganisation, which is really important. It's the biggest shake-up for local government in decades.
Big shake-up, Preet, but is it ever right to cancel elections?
Well, look, I mean, when the Conservatives cancelled elections in Northamptonshire, Yorkshire and many other places, nobody said democracy was dead. And what we are saying is that they will be delayed until 2027 because the reforms mean when you are taking over two-tier councils, they would have had to have one election now and another one next year. That makes no sense because guess what? They're delivering for adult social care, children in care. These are key services. This is taxpayers' money and we've got to spend it wisely. Well, not doing a rerun a year later.
Sitting next to you are two men who were shaking their heads. Patrick.
These powers should be used very sparingly in times of a pandemic, for example, or even in times of war. They should not be used just to save the necks of whichever party, whichever.
Previously,
I've had all local elections 2 years ago. I have difficult local elections with the third up in May this year. Do I want to postpone elections? No. Let's take the fight to the
You
electorate.
had the chance to let the Secretary of State know yesterday.
I don't want to. I want to fight these campaigns. They should be fighting these campaigns on a fair and proper basis and take your chance. You take your chance with the electorate.
It's
I think there's a bigger picture here. Out of those 63 councils that this Labour government allowed to cancel elections, 46% of them are Labour-ran councils. There's a bigger question going on here. They are afraid of a reform control of most councils.
There are Conservative and Lib Dem councils that have also asked for their
of course there are, but it's very, very small amount. My point is that how can you, for example, the Rugby Borough Council leader who is Labour, who is up for re-election now, he has voted to send a letter to the government asking to cancel his own elections, which are one of Reform's top seats to win. That's the question.
This has got nothing to do with reform. This is councils having the opportunity to save taxpayers' money. These are only delaying these elections. They're happening in 2027. We're not cancelling them. Democracy is not
already
dead.
been budgeted.
Right, we're going to talk about something else now, very briefly before the end of the programme. We had some big defections from the Conservatives, Patrick, to Reform UK this week. The former Stratford-upon-Avon MP, Conservative MP, Nadeem Zahawi, stepped down at the last election. Here he is defecting to Reform UK, and hot on his heels later in the week, although rather less smooth announcement, being fired from the Conservative Party by Kemi Badenoch. We then had Robert Jenrick doing the exact same thing later in the week. George, is Reform just becoming a suppository for washed up toys?
Oh, no, definitely not. You know, as Reform UK prepares for government, because, you know, we are highly likely to take control of this country.
You just need the Conservative support.
So not at all. I think there's an element of expertise and especially big donors that Nadeem Zahawi brings to Reform UK that we can use to take control of this government, because we all know and the people know across West Midlands that we do need significant change. So we thought,
but how is it change if it's all former Conservative ministers?
Because this country needs Nigel Farage to lead. And what my point is that this country is at the brink of disaster and it needs reform now.
It needs reform and lots of former Conservatives, Patrick.
Well, they can have ex-ministers like Nadeem or every day of the week for me, because I don't think he's an asset to reform or indeed the Conservatives. Robert Jenrick, different story. I think personally a big loss. However, he's made his choice and we move on. And I think in the next 2 or 3 months, we'll see the clashes of egos with Farage and Jenrick, and that's when I think this honeymoon period will come to an end. It's a loss for now, but in the long term, probably again for the Conservatives, as Kemi starts to find
Preet,
feet.
A lot of people saying Kemi Badenoch came out of this really well, the way she handled this, very, very firm.
Yeah, but I mean, look, people will see through reform. I mean, they talked about making savings. They made a whole heap of promises. And what we're actually seeing, they'll be hiking up council taxes everywhere where they are in power. And people will see by the next general election that actually it's all very well making lots of, comments about what you will do when you can't actually say how you're going to pay for it. When you don't actually have a proper plan, it only becomes a press release. It's not real policy.
Okay, Patrick, very quickly, because we haven't got long, are you going to be joining forces with Reform at the next election?
What I would, there's probably a lot I will work with any party to deliver for my residents. I've dealt with Liberal Democrats, I've dealt with UKIP in the past when we've had no overall control. So you do the right thing. It's not left, it's not right. It's giving the right thing for your constituents.
Okay.
We have to work together to get Labour out.
All right. Okay. Well, there you go. You're on your mettle now, Preet. You know what's coming.
This government is absolutely delivering. I mean, it's all very well that all we are seeing in reform is a distraction.
I'm afraid that is all we've got time for. Thank you to my guests. We will be back at the same time next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye bye.